Hi everyone, this is Native Girl. Welcome in to Native Girl Talks Crime. I wanted to go over some of the documents with everyone tonight. I haven't gone over it, and I imagine some of you have, some of you may have not, but I want to share it with everyone and maybe do some commentary because I'm not really sure what's in it. I've heard a little bit of this and a little bit of that from different ones, but I've really not sat down and read it. And so what we have here is the Superior Court of the State of California for the County of Los Angeles, People of the State of California, Plaintiff versus David Anthony Burke, Defendant. We have the People's Brief regarding preliminary hearing evidence from April 29th, 2026, 1:30 p.m., Court Department 105. So I'm just going to read through this, and if something, grabs my attention that we've discussed in the past, then we might make a little bit of a comparison. But I'm going to go ahead and start. And we have to the Honorable Judge Charlene Omido, and if I mispronounce that, I am so sorry, of the above entitled court, and to defendant and his counsel of record. The people submit the following brief to provide a roadmap for the evidence the people intend to introduce at the preliminary hearing scheduled to begin May 1st, 2026. So this was, um, well, it looks like we have a hearing today, which I have not covered, so we'll probably be going over whatever happened then as well, but not tonight. Um, this is the case of David Burke, and he has been charged with the murder of Celeste Rivas Hernandez. I think it's really important that people see this and realize what all has been done to this poor girl. And so we're going to start with the background facts. The dismembered body of 14-year-old Celeste R., victim, was discovered in the front trunk of defendant's Tesla Model X on September 8, 2025. The vehicle had been towed 3 days prior from 1405 Bluebird Avenue, which was parked approximately 400 feet from defendant's home at 1368 Doheny Place in the Hollywood Hills. Surveillance video and other evidence confirmed defendant was the last person to drive the vehicle on July 29, 2025, before he left Los Angeles on a concert tour. I think this is really interesting because all of the information that has come out up until this point has been that someone other than David Burke was the last person to drive the Tesla. So, for all of you that have been following this, I mean, it changes. I mean, this is like a big game changer. Um, a lot of speculation was made about who that was, that the last person to drive the Tesla, and we've all been led to believe that it was someone different. So I think this will be interesting, if this all goes to trial and we find out for sure who was actually driving the Tesla. Okay, so now we're going to move on to second part. On September 8th, 2025, the manager of the tow yard where the Tesla had been impounded noted the strong smell and decay and the presence of flies coming from the vehicle. And I think this is something we had all talked about, that people were trying to decide whether the trunk was airtight. Um, I think that I mean, it couldn't have been airtight if you've got flies coming out of the frunk. So let's see. He notified Los Angeles Police Department, the LAPD, Hollywood Auto Detectives, who determined the Tesla was registered to defendant through departmental resources. At the tow yard, LAPD detectives opened the Tesla's front storage compartment and observed a black cadaver bag covered in insects. Inside the bag, they discovered a severely, I'm sorry, trigger warning. Please be aware that throughout this, there is going to be a lot of triggering issues. We're going to be discussing things from what it looks like of highly decomposed bodies, highly decomposed body parts, and we are also dealing with a minor. So this is going to be triggering. Okay, so let me start this over. At the tow yard, LAPD detectives opened the Tesla's front storage compartment and observed a black cadaver bag covered in insects. Inside the bag, they discovered a severely decomposed head and torso. So that sounds like that's one bag. A plastic garbage bag beneath the cadaver bag contained the dismembered arms and legs. So they have two bags here. One is a black cadaver bag, and the second one is a plastic garbage bag that was underneath the black cadaver bag. And that is what contained the dismembered arms and legs. However, pinky, the victim's ring and pinky fingers on her left hand had been amputated and were not found in the Tesla. I wonder if this is a typo, or is that something that people say, pinky fingers? I mean, I had always thought that your pinky finger was one, but you also have your ring finger. So I'm not really sure what to make of that. However, the victim's ring, which would probably have been on that second to last finger, and the pinky fingers on her left hand had been amputated and were not found in the Tesla. Okay, maybe we'll get some clarification, or someone out here might know it, and you can leave it in the comments if you have some clarification. On September 16th, 2025, the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Department positively identified the body from dental records as belonging to the victim. So I'm not seeing that. I mean, it may come up. I'm not exactly sure what we're reading from here on out, but I would say that it looks like up until this point, they didn't use DNA to identify the body, but they did use dental records. Okay, until we hear otherwise, they have not mentioned being identified with DNA. Okay, so pursuant to the investigation, LAPD robbery homicide detectives determined the victim and defendant met in January 2022 when she was 11 years old. I mean, this is about as sick as it, we're we're thinking that, possibly she was 13. Then you find out that maybe she was 12. Then you find out 11. And now here they're saying there's evidence that, she was 11 years old when they met. They began a sexual relationship in November 2023 when the victim was just 13 years old and the defendant was 18. So, I mean, based on this, I mean, I would conclude that he was grooming her for 2 years. I mean, if this evidence that they have and it plays out in court, um, this is some bad stuff. And Celeste Rivas didn't deserve this. Detectives learned the victim had been reported missing to the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, RCSD, by her family, who lived in Lake Elsinore, in February and April of 2024. RCSD telephonically contacted defendant on February 17, 2024, after they identified a phone number in the victim's phone records that belonged to him. During the call, defendant claimed he had spoken to the victim last on February 13th or 14th of 2024, but stated he was unaware she was a minor and that she had been reported missing. So let's see, they're contacting him in 2024. So we're in 2026, last year was 2025, and the year prior was when she was reported to have been a runaway, I believe it was. Well, her parents had reported it and the police were investigating. After they identified the phone number in the victim's phone records that belonged to him. So during the call, he's claiming that he had last spoken to the victim on February 13th or 14th. So February 14th was Valentine's Day, and I'm not sure where she went after that. And so we can really draw the conclusion that after this point, he was aware that she was a minor. There was no mistaken. This states that he was contacted and told that she was a minor. RCSD advised him that Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, LASD deputies would be coming to his home. On that day, defendant was living at 804 North Doheny Place in West Hollywood. RCSD requested that LASD conduct a welfare check at defendant's home. LASD deputies went to the defendant's home that night at 8:15 p.m. and informed him the victim was a 13-year-old runaway. Defendant again claimed he was unaware. Okay. He was unaware she was a minor and that he had only met the victim once in person in November 2023. However, defendant showed deputies a yearbook photo of the victim he had on his cell phone. Although he claimed to be unaware of where the victim was at the time, she returned home 2 days later. And I think, previously we had shown records of someone reaching out to his manager through email, and there was that, you know, that debate of whether they actually saw the emails that were requesting them to send Celeste back, um, notifying them that she was a runaway. And I can't remember who sent the emails, but I think what's eye-opening in that is she did return home right after that. Okay, now let's move on to despite being informed by law enforcement the victim was only 13, defendant continued to pursue her. After the victim returned home in February 2024, her parents took her cell phone away. So it looks like they were trying to do something. I think that you're pretty limited when you have a teenager that doesn't want to listen, um, and they don't want to stay home. You can take away their let's see, personal items like their telephone, their electronics, their privileges. But you can't tie them up. You can't lock them in the room. You can't put chains on the door. You're limited on what you can do. If you have a child that is a preteen or at any age, if they are determined not to listen for whatever reason, whether they're being coaxed out, whether they're just, thinking their parents are just the worst in the world. And, we find that in teenagers. Um, so I think they were limited on what they could do. And I really, really do not like hearing victim blaming. The parents did this or the parents did that because unless you've had the experience or know someone that's had the experience, it's very difficult to deal with a child that has, her own mind, like just very strongly determined to do things. And most of the time, I think that's something in their future that characteristic can help them in life. They're determined. They're, kind of go-getters later on in life when they're in the job world. Unfortunately, she never got to that point because of what happened to her. So let's see, they took away her cell phone. The defendant drove to Lake Elsinore and paid a junior high school student in the victim's class $1,000 to give the victim a cell phone. Defendant purchased the defendant purchased so they could stay in contact. See, that's just, I mean, he's going above and beyond if this is how it played out. He was more than willing to try to stay in contact with her from what this is stating. Throughout 2024, the victim spent a significant amount of time with defendant, including summer weekends at his home in the Hollywood Hills and traveling with him to Las Vegas, London, and Texas to meet his family. He's crossed state lines with her. This is this is more than I thought would come out. So, I'm really happy to see that they did this thorough investigation when we were all questioning, what are they doing here? Are they really going after the leads that they have? Are they following up on everything? I mean, we're seeing some things that, they've really done their job. Okay, so we'll move on. Text exchanges between the victim and the defendant contain references to, trigger warning, we have a minor here, and we're going to be referring to this and what happened to her or may have happened. Text exchanges between the victim and defendant contain references to sex, pregnancy, abortion, and the use of the Plan B emergency contraceptive. There are also explicit photographs documenting and corroborating their sexual relationship. Ugh, this is so hard to take in. I mean, she was a child. In November 2024, defendant and the victim broke up. So, November 2024 is when they broke up, although they continued to communicate and text messages suggest they also continued to have sexual relations. So, they broke up. They continued to communicate. They continued to text message, and it looks like well, he was still going to her for the purpose of sex. Unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable because they were also I'm trying to think when it was, December 2024 was when they were saying that at the time, I mean, it was widely circulated that that in December and January. That was around the last December 2024 and January 2024 were some of the last pictures taken. Um, I'm sure that this will, cue us in on a little bit more details than what we had prior to that. Okay, April 23rd, 2025, it is the likely date of the victim's death and when all her cellular activity ceased. So at this time, based on what was said earlier in the paperwork, he was providing her cell phones. So I don't know if this, they're referring to a phone that he supplied to her or it was a plan that she had with her parents. So the night prior, we're looking in April 23rd as her likely date of death. So the night prior, on April 22nd, 2025, and we're talking about last year, last April, defendant and the victim engaged in a lengthy argument described in detail in their text messages. The messages reveal the victim's jealousy over the defendant's relationship with other women, as defendant led her to believe they had a future together. It's so sad. It really is. I mean, she was a child, and she's thinking of herself as this adult now and making all these adult decisions, but that she's still a child. And he's leading her to believe that there's this future. And I think personally that the minute they became intimate, she became a liability to him. I mean, how else do you look at it? So I would say he was using this future together as some maybe negotiating. He was able to negotiate that she not, they're having a future together. She can't take off and tell people what's going on. Um, so on this night, she's jealous over his relationship with other women. And I mean, according to just the paragraph above, they were broke up at that time. But I think in relationships, I mean, we're not dealing with an two adults here. We are dealing with a child and an adult. But I think that there was probably some, you know, breakups and then they'd possibly get back together and then there were some gray areas in between. But she's emotionally invested in him. I mean, you could just see it. All of the things that we've seen, she thinks that she's in a relationship with him, and it just doesn't sound like he was doing the same. He's out leading a rapper's life. I'm surprised that he took her on location with him, though. That really surprises me. I mean, I thought he possibly did, but I mean, it's just shocking to think that he was so brazen that he was taking her all over the place for these concerts. Okay, so we're getting past the jealousy. She thought they had a future together. Okay, she became extremely upset and threatened to disclose damaging information about her relationship with the defendant to end his career and destroy his life. So, previously, I was involved in a live regarding this topic, and I had really thought that that's what it came to after January of 2025, that something happened. And most likely to me was that she decided to, it was like this child, not even realizing the dangers of telling a grown man, I'm going to tell. Um, yeah, she couldn't have possibly understood the consequences. I think an older girl, a more worldly, older woman would understand, but she was a child. She's coming at him with, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do it, and she thinks, this is gonna keep him. And it did the exact opposite because, in my opinion, he was a monster. So let's see. She became extremely upset, threatened to disclose damaging information about her relationship with defendant to end his career and destroy his life. Defendant's first studio album was due to be released on April 25th. So that's just 23rd, 2 days after the most likely time, that period that she died, April 23rd. He had an emerging multi-million dollar career already in progress. He had multiple product endorsements, which were highly profitable. At approximately 8:40 p.m. on April 23, 2025, defendants sent an Uber to transport the victim from her Lake Elsinore home to his residence. So he sent an Uber. They communicated before and during her Uber ride, which dropped her off at defendant's Hollywood Hills home around 10:10 p.m. At approximately 10:30, the defendant sent text messages to the victim inquiring where she was. So she's arrived at his home at 10:10. 20 minutes later, he's sending her texts asking where she is. The people contend this was part of defendant's premeditated plan to cover up the murder, as she was already dead by this time. Just think about that for a minute. He had an Uber go pick her up, bring her there, or take her there, and within 20 minutes, she's gone. And I will say that everyone is innocent until proven guilty. But I think this is a really hard one to just sit back and say, he didn't do it. I would like to be, I mean, this is commentary. If I went at this completely objective, I think it would be, I would still have a hard time coming to the conclusion. And I think most of us do. If you're looking at everything that happened and the evidence that they are showing, I mean, it's just, I mean, it's hard to draw any other conclusions. But it's important that, anybody that goes in there, they like a jury, we want them to be impartial. We want them to see all the evidence. And it looks like they're going to have a lot to review. Okay. Um, this was a really hard case to start, and it's been a really hard case through the middle. And I just really wish we're at least halfway there and that justice is served and that everyone that was involved in this has to be accountable in some way. Okay, the next paragraph. Knowing he had to silence the victim before she ruined his music career, as she had threatened, very soon after her arrival at his home, defendant stabbed the victim to death multiple times and stood by while she bled out. At no time did he call law enforcement or 911 or take her to an emergency room to attempt to save her life. It's just the uh, it's unfathomable that people can, I mean, people out there in the world like this. He was so calculating. Uber gets there 10:10 at night, and they believe that by 10:30 she'd already passed away. And here he is, just sending messages to her. So let's know he had to silence the victim before she ruined his music career, as she had threatened very soon after her arrival at his home. Defendant stabbed the victim to death multiple times and stood by while she bled out. He didn't call 911. Despite knowing she was dead and her family was trying to find her, the evidence will show defendant lied and claimed he didn't know where she was. In fact, defendant drove to Santa Barbara County immediately after the victim died, attempting to dispose of her property and destroy evidence. I'm going to go back to where I was. At approximately 11:30 p.m. on April 23rd, 2025, he drove away from his home as he texted and called the victim's phone, asking where she was. Again, these were acts calculated and planned to set up his defense within a very short timeline after the victim's vicious murder. Can you imagine? I mean, it is. It's so calculated. He sends an Uber over after her. She arrives at his house, and based on this, 20 minutes later, he's already ended her life. So we're going to move on to defendant drove his Tesla north on the 101 freeway to San Marcos Pass Road, SRI 54, near Lake Cachuma. I'm sorry if I said this wrong. Leave it in the comments if you can correct me with the pronunciation. Near Lake Cachuma in Santa Barbara County. He returned home early the following morning on April 24th, 2025, before going to the radio interview for the release of his album. And that week, he sent 2 additional texts to the victim that day, which obviously went unanswered because she's already passed away. After April 26, 2025, defendant never attempted to contact her again. That's pretty telling, I think. So she's missing. They have it showing through records that he's calling her phone. And then 2 days later, or is it 3 days? 3 days later was the last time he attempted to contact her again. You don't do that with people you care about. I mean, we know what he is based on what we're seeing he's done. And I just feel so bad for Celeste to have fallen under his control like that. I mean, she just wasn't prepared for this job. Uh, Tellingly, was there something else I wanted to go over on here? Hold on, let me check real quick. Um, okay, I think that was it. Tellingly, defendant subsequently purchased tools to carry out his plot to dismember and dispose of the victim's body. On April 24, 2025, defendant ordered a shovel from Home Depot that was delivered to his home from Postmates. On May 1st, 2025, defendant ordered and subsequently Amazon delivered 2 chainsaws to his home. On May 5th, 2025, defendant ordered and Amazon subsequently delivered a body bag, a heavy-duty laundry bags, and a blue inflatable pool to his home. He made these purchases under the fake name Victoria Mendez. On May 8, 2025, defendant returned to the same area in Santa Barbara County, leaving his home around 11:30. He returned to the area again on May 31st, 2025. This is an isolated site off SR 154 where the victim's identification was subsequently discovered in January 2026. Additionally, on July 7, 2025, defendant ordered and subsequently Amazon delivered a burn cage to his home under the fake name as part of his plan to incinerate evidence. So we have him going out to Santa Barbara County 3 times. And during their investigation, I believe it was I don't remember if it's the sheriff's office or the police department, but they had said there was they had said there was evidence from they didn't actually I don't think they actually said what it was from, whether it was the car or the phone. And they were able to place 2 people in the car that night that was in question because it leaked somehow that they were looking into him driving out to Santa Barbara late at night. And, everybody's questioning what he would be doing out there. But they put out a statement saying that they weren't sure if this was evidence or if it was even relevant to the case. But now we're seeing it definitely may have been. I mean, you have three trips out to Santa Barbara. So I'm wondering if he had her phone. I can't imagine her body would have been in the frunk at that time. I mean, I suppose anything's possible. But I'm really kind of thinking maybe he had someone with him that night. Otherwise, I'm thinking it's just, one of the phones that he had for her. All right, so moreover, defendant took horrifying measures to destroy and discard the victim's body after placing her body into the blue inflatable pool to prevent her blood from spilling onto his garage floor. Trigger warning. I'm sorry I didn't say it before, but here we go. Defendant used a chainsaw and perhaps other tools to cut off her limbs. This guy did this. Such a monster. Small blue plastic fragments were found embedded in the victim's remains, which were collected by the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Department. The fragments were analyzed by the LAPD's Forensic Science Division Trace Analysis Unit. An expert was able to make a physical match from the blue fragments to the blue inflatable pool purchased by defendant in May of 2025. In order to distance himself from the victim, he amputated her left ring and pinky fingers because her ring finger contained a tattoo of his name. Her fingers have not been recovered. Defendant then placed her head and torso into the cadaver bags he purchased. The cadaver bag. He placed her limbs into a garbage bag which he deposited into the front trunk, laying the cadaver bag on top. For several weeks or possibly months, defendant left the victim's body to decompose inside his Tesla. He lied to friends, business associates, and others who noticed the strong smell of decay in and around his home and vehicle before leaving on his concert tour at the end of July. He parked his Tesla on the street around the corner from his home. LAPD served a search warrant at defendant's home at excuse me, 1368 Dehaney Place on September 17, 2025, after the victim was identified by the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner on September 16, 2025. Inside the garage, detectives discovered evidence consistent with the dismemberment of the victim's body in an inflatable pool, which contained multiple linear cuts. Several biological samples, which tested positive for blood, were collected within the garage area, and DNA analysis determined that various samples matched the victim's unique genetic profile. I wonder what the difference between unique genetic profile and just plain genetic profile are. I mean, are they the same thing? I do not know. Leave it in the comment if you do know. Thank you. On December 9, 2025, the medical examiner ruled the victim's death a homicide caused by two penetrating injuries to the torso. So they've known this since December 9th, 2025. They were really keeping things to themselves. On January 17th, 2025, the victim's U.S. passport card was found by a Caltrans worker off SR I-54 in Santa Barbara County. Santa Barbara County is where they're stating he drove out to 3 times after he had unalived her. So let's see. Evidence. The people will present the following evidence at the preliminary hearing, including but not limited to the description of photographs depicting the victim naked, trigger warning, as well as while she was engaged with the defendant in sexual activity when she was 13 years old. It's hard to even say. As this evidence constitutes CSAM, child sexual abuse material, the photographs themselves will not be presented. While all possible charges that could be proven were not filed, the CSAM is proof of their ongoing sexual relationship while the victim was 13 and 14 years old. So this is stating that there are a multitude of charges that while all possible charges that could be proven were not filed. So they didn't file all of the charges that they could have. And I'm trying to figure that out. does it mean that they're still investigating that? Um, are they going to give him a deal to plead down? Or, I mean, it just doesn't, I don't know. I don't know what to think of it. So I'm hoping that while all possible charges that could be proven were not filed, that they end up being filed. So they're using that information in order to establish proof that there was that relationship between them. I mean, if they have evidence that can do that, then yes, we want to see it, but we want to see they have that evidence, but I don't think anybody would want to see him getting away with the um, abuse that he did, the CSAM. Numerous text messages between the defendant and the victim evidencing their sexual relationship, pregnancy, abortion, and use of Plan B emergency contraception. And this is an interesting one because I had brought this up in a live, and it was basically how I just did not believe that the medical examiner could come to the conclusion that she had not been pregnant at any point during the year prior. I mean, it really, I mean, based on how decomposed she was, uh, it wouldn't have been, the signs wouldn't have been there if she had just had a short pregnancy and miscarried, or if she had an abortion, an early abortion. I just, I disagreed with that. And kind of like to go over that again with everyone just so we kind of loop back to where the medical examiner is going with this. So messages through March 25th, March 2025, proved defendant continued to manipulate the victim as she messaged, quote, "All we do is have sex and hang out. Man, I want more than that for myself," unquote. These messages were obtained from defendant's iCloud data. How sad is that? I mean, she realizes at this point that he's just using her. I mean, she's saying that's all they're doing. She wants to hang out with him, so it sounds like he's there for one reason, or has her there for one reason. Then he takes off and he does his own thing. I mean, we've got a grown man treating this child like this. It's so disgusting. All right, defendant's cellular activity and communications derived from the defendant's iPhone and Tesla, which demonstrates defendant's activities from April 22nd, 2025 to April 24th, 2025, including a trip to Santa Barbara County in the middle of the night after the victim arrived at his house in Hollywood Hills home. Surveillance video of defendant driving his Tesla on July 29, 2025 for the last time before parking the vehicle and leaving on tour at the end of July. Hmm. So it just doesn't look like. So he was, so that was his method. He was moving the car around because that was back in July. Oh no, end of July. And this is David that did it. That's who they saw doing it on their Surveillance video. DNA evidence developed from bloodstains collected from defendant's garage, which matched the victim's genetic profile. Proof of defendant's Amazon purchases and deliveries to his residence, including 2 chainsaws, a body bag and inflatable pool, heavy-duty laundry bags, and a burn cage after April 24, 2025. Proof of the defendant's purchase and delivery from Postmates of a shovel from Home Depot to his home on April 24, 2025. Uber records showing defendant's transaction where he ordered an Uber to pick up the victim from her Lake Elsinore home and transport her to his residence the night of April 23, 2025. Proof of the defendant's lucrative career as a singer and songwriter prior to April 23, 2025. Defendant had an album release party on the night of April 24, 2025, before embarking on an international tour in late July 2025. And then the last of it was text messages exchanged. Text message text text message exchanges between defendant and the victim on April 22nd and April 23rd, 2025, where the victim threatened to expose defendant, destroy his career. So they have this. They're not guessing. They're reading the texts that were between them. Conclusion. The brief is filed to assist the court in understanding the scope of relevance of evidence the prosecution intends to present at the preliminary hearing. The prosecution has issued numerous subpoenas and it is prepared to proceed with the preliminary hearing. The defense has had my mouth's not working with me tonight. The defense has had multiple opportunities to request a continuance but has not done so. Furthermore, California Penal Code 1050 1050, not sure how that, I'm learning. Okay, so this penal code requires the defense to provide at least 2 court days notice to request a continuance. In view of the limited scope of evidence to be presented at the preliminary hearing detailed in this brief, there should be no substantial impediment to moving forward with the hearing as scheduled. Dated this 29th day of April 2026. Respectfully submitted, Nathan Hochman, District Attorney of Los Angeles County, by Beth Silverman, Deputy District Attorney, attorneys for plaintiff. Looks like that is. So, go back and make sure I looked at everything. Okay, bear with me, bear with me. I don't know, I think I might have repeated myself somewhere in here. Okay, if I did, apologize. That's it. I really appreciate all of you that were able to come in and watch. Let me see. I appreciate all of you being here, that we're able to be here. And I think that's it. I think we all ready for bed. Maybe not. I don't, not sure. But everybody, be kind, stay positive, and I'll talk to you later.